So I am calling the meeting to order. It is 11:04. A reminder of our norms. Agenda for today, we will start as we always do with roll call and approving meeting minutes. Just as a reminder or FYI, on last week on the day that Emily was presenting with Jan. We did not have quorum, so we did not have official meeting minutes nor record. So we are still going to approve the meeting minutes from the 22nd of July, not from the following week. And then we'll do prep for our meeting, which is coming up faster than we know, August 13th. So next Thursday from 1 to 4, we'll be in the same room that we were in previously. Hey, Althea. And so we will spend the majority of our time working on that. Our goals for today are one, I'm going to provide a little time in the meeting for folks to work on the stakeholder engagement question survey. I sent this out last week, but I think it got a little bit buried in the shuffle. We have 3 focus groups this week, one for parents, one for principals, and one for students. And we have some surveys going out. And I want to make sure any questions you have for those different stakeholder groups are represented in the questions. So I actually have a survey that I'll drop in the chat and give people time in this meeting to complete it so that you don't have homework for after the meeting. And then I'd love to give a quick update on where the Pathways design and governance team is starting to land with some of their synthesized recommendations coming out of the last meeting, because I think it's helpful context as we're thinking about our recommendations, about how they would fit into the program. So I can share a little bit of that. Also, hopefully that helps prime everyone before they're providing their recommendations live, so that you have time to give feedback for the discussion. And then we'll spend time planning for the August 13th meeting, both in terms of the run of show, followed by actual discussion on the recommendations. So that is the plan for today. And Emily, Jan, did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. So quick roll call. Emily Palin,
Can't find my mute. Here.
Jan Hokedal,
Here.
Madeline Negron is not joining us today. She's on vacation. Tyler Yee,
Here.
Larry Ward, not here currently. Jennifer Leeper,
Here.
and Althea Marshall Brooks.
Here.
Wonderful. And now calling for approval of the meeting minutes. And before I do that, any discussion or edits to the meeting minutes from the 22nd? All right, motion to approve.
So made.
Jen Leeper at 11:07. Motion to second.
Second.
Althea at 11:07. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
All opposed? All abstaining? Motion passes at 11:07. Thank you. Okay, great. So quick reminder, please do send us your handles for LinkedIn, as well as the email of your comms folks, as we will be wanting to tag those people in relevant posts, as well as if you have a mechanism to blast out to your networks, want to make sure to get those folks involved. Althea, I see your hand up.
Are you asking our personal? Because I have very limited presence on social media personally. I'm just nowhere to be found. I have. So are you saying in personal or organizations?
Great question. Wherever your organization has the greatest reach. So if that's through your, executive director profile on LinkedIn, great. If that's through your organization's profile, great. But we're pretty much at this point exclusively using LinkedIn. There might be some light Instagram as well, so feel free to add either of those, but primarily we're thinking about LinkedIn. But in terms of the comms strategy, that's really just an email or phone number for your primary comms point of contact, who would be the best person to discuss blasting things out to your networks. And feel free to just drop those in the chat while we're talking. And Ben and I are happy to pull them down and add them to the relevant spreadsheet that we're tracking. Um, and then there is this stakeholder engagement survey that I put together. So I will, this is always the thing that with Zoom that I don't know. Okay, stop sharing. I'm going to drop this in the chat. It basically just says for these different demographic groups, parents, students, teachers, school counselors, principals, etc., what questions do you want to make sure that we're asking them? So I will just send that out to everyone and give 5 minutes to fill it out. Let me know if that link works.
Yep.
Great. I'll give everyone 5 minutes, so we'll reconvene at 11:15. People need a few more minutes to finish up, or are people good to go? A minute or two?
Do you need this today, Riley?
No, it doesn't need to be today. Just
Yeah.
and feel free to noodle on it and submit it later. We do have the first of our focus groups today with parents. So if there are
Mhm.
things you specifically want to ask to parents, please, and you're not going to finish the survey today, just please drop them in the chat or send me an email so I'll make sure that they get asked today. But otherwise, feel free to, complete at your leisure at a later time this week.
I guess for me, being able to actually understand what the tone and intent of the conversation is, because these are very loaded questions that you have here that you're asking us to respond to, because this could be, I could sit here and run a whole list just on the first question alone. So if there is a very focused conversation that's happening, because I'm sure the Jesse and the Dr. Cardona are not going to be there forever, right? So just parent conversation, I mean, that alone, I mean, I could put a ton of things. So I'm just trying to figure out how to best focus what I think should be the questions that should be asked.
Yeah, that's very helpful context of how you're thinking. Um, we only have an hour with parents, unfortunately, for this specific conversation today. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be ongoing conversations, but essentially the way that we've divided it out is about, 10 to 15 minutes per working group in terms of the questions. So overall design, what would you like to see in a pathways program for your student? How important is it to you that your student is in a pathways program? Then with student access, like dual enrollment, are you interested in your student being able to participate in dual enrollment? So it's really just gauging like parent awareness and interest in these programs, and then also what are the barriers that exist today and how can we facilitate removing some of those barriers?
So, not to belabor this, I think that alone right there is a problem. We make assumptions that parents know what pathways are. We make assumptions
Mhm.
that parents know all the things that you just offered. And once again, it yields and serves a population of students and families who have that kind of awareness and education, but not necessarily those who would be very much interested in their children having access to that and them being engaged and having some communication around that. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I think maybe Althea, I can schedule time with you for outside of this
Yeah.
meeting to get your thoughts and feedback on how we're engaging parents. Definitely, there will be a preamble at the start that shares more context around the work that we're doing, just to level set some of the definitional things that you're discussing to make sure that the conversation is accessible for all. But I would love to pick your brain to make sure that we're being as thoughtful and inclusive as possible. So let me reach out to you after this meeting and find some
I
time
think
for us to
so.
connect.
And I would hope, and not, we can definitely do that, that we're thinking about that as the subcommittee focused on specifically around student supports. And that's why even with Delaware, great program, but a bunch of community conversations for me, and I didn't push back in that meeting when I asked that, it's just not parent engagement for me, right? I think there has to be more engagement and ownership of parents and caregivers in this process that's tangible and constant and ongoing, not just a couple conversations in a feedback loop and then move on and just focus on students. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that um, some of the conversations that we're trying to get scheduled are, take a while to put together, and so they will likely be increasing in volume as the process goes on, just because we're like still reaching out to all of our networks and trying to create an ongoing cadence. And so I think there will be a greater intensity of conversations a little bit later in the process as our recommendations are coming together so that we can get real tangible feedback on those recommendations, because I do think we don't want to like overwhelm parents and families with ideas that are half baked, where parents are like, I don't know what you're talking about because you don't know what you're talking about. And so I think we want to come with something that feels a little bit more coherent in front of stakeholder groups as to not waste their time, but hear you loud and clear. And this will be so I think just to go back to way from the beginning of the commission, this is all sort of like right now gathering input from various stakeholders, but then there's going to be a whole second half of the comms plan that is very much like a road show where we're going around to all different communities, all different types of stakeholders, and really engaging in a dialogue and a conversation and more of like a roundtable style conversation to make sure that it feels robust and, to your point, not just like one-off conversations. But I would love to get your thoughts on how to do that part thoughtfully in this sort of upcoming stage that we're about to enter into.
Thank you, Riley.
Yep, no
If
problem.
I could just react to Althea's great points, I think like the authentic engagement is absolutely crucial, and we'll be super excited to learn what you're learning from the focus groups and surveys so that that can inform our continued planning. There was something else, Althea, in what you were saying that really resonated with me around using accessible language. So I wonder when we're talking to students, families, even us as practitioners, when we hear things like stackable credentials and dual enrollment and pathways, are we all like visualizing the same thing, or do we have any idea? So I think that the language that we use in rolling out some of these concepts will be really important because there's just a lot. Like I've been learning a lot and trying to track some of these conversations.
Yes, definitely double tap that. I think that like having shared definitions and using non-jargony language, like that's even feedback that has come through from commission members. And like arguably we are more steeped in this than the average member of the public. So I think that we need to make sure that we are speaking in a way that is commonplace language and is not, using jargon for jargon's sake. So thank you for raising that as well. Awesome. Well, thank you for taking that survey. Again, respond on your own time. But if there's anything urgent that you want to make sure is included in the focus groups for this week, please let me know. Also, hi, Larry. Good to see you. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. Okay. So these are just quick reminders. Nothing new here, but August 13th is our group's session. We are sharing it with the student access group, so the group that Ben is working with. And the goal for the 13th is to start to raise some ideas of solutions, but they do not need to be fully baked. We are throwing ideas out there and seeing how other commission members react to them. By August 27th, we want to do more of a synthesis of both as we've refined our thinking, but also as we've heard feedback from commission members, how are those results starting to shape up? And then later in the fall is when we'll get actually a draft report into the governor. And so we do have time to continue to refine. So if things don't feel fully fleshed out or baked by August 13th, not to worry, we have plenty of time to continue refining. Any questions or thoughts here before we keep going? Okay. Today is August 5th. We are focusing today on trying to get more tactical about what our recommendations are. Next week on Wednesday, August 12th, we'll have our last working group meeting before our commission meeting. That will really just be final look through before the 13th, make sure everyone feels comfortable with what's being presented. And then on August 13th, we'll be, actually having the Career Connected Education Commission meeting, same room that we've been using. And then on August 27th is when we'll report back at the Work-Based Learning Commission meeting. This is the tentative schedule for the meeting on the 13th, so I'll give people time to peruse it, but essentially there are three main sections that are bookended by Miguel giving some opening and closing remarks. First, the Pathways Design and Governance team, who reported out on July 9th, will come back and talk about their synthesis and what they learned and how they're thinking about reshaping the recommendations, and then there will be a breakout to discuss that. Then the group that Ben is working with, Student Access, will do their recommendation sharing, followed by a breakout discussion. Same thing for our group. So you'll see we have about 50 minutes on the schedule. Right now, we have it broken out 25 minutes for recommendation sharing and 25 minutes for breakout discussion. We have flexibility to play with that. So if we would prefer to do short presentation, short breakout discussion, and keep alternating between those, that's fine. If we'd rather do 10 minutes of presentation and 35 minutes of discussion, that's fine too. That's sort of our room to play with. But this is just a general guideline that I think at least half of the time should be spent doing discussion. Any questions on this?
Riley, do you know where the meeting is on August 13th?
It's at that same room in the Capitol,
Okay.
310.
Riley, do you know if we're going to be seated in our working groups again or in another configuration?
I think we heard feedback that people would prefer to not be sitting in working groups, though we haven't decided officially. Do you have thoughts? Because that's still very much up for discussion if you all have ideas of what would be preferable.
My only thought would be if we do a repeat, especially for our section, if we could somehow sprinkle ourselves across other tables to eavesdrop on those conversations and get their reactions.
Yep. And I think that was the intention of July 9th's meeting structure, is that by sitting in working groups, then the Pathways Design and Governance team could be split out. And like, I don't know if you guys remember, Joel Hicks Rivera came and sat down with us and was reporting back to his group. So from that perspective, I really like that structure. But I do think that there was some commentary in the survey that people really enjoy speaking with practitioners who have similar contexts that they do, either, like we all work in K-12 or in higher ed. That shared context for discussing ideas is also helpful. So still TBD, but regardless, for this group, you should consider yourselves not sitting in either your working group or constituent group. You'll be floating around to other tables to listen in and report back feedback, but also to be there if there's questions. You can provide the clarification since you have the context that other members might not about the work that our group is doing. Okay. So this is where I would love to preview for you all some of the work that the Pathways Design and Governance team has started to pull together coming out of their meeting to get a little bit more tactical about like what we're actually talking about in terms of a program. So I'll actually just give folks time to read this rather than presenting it to you all. And then I will pause for questions. But this is where they're starting to come out based on the feedback from the commission meeting, as well as the survey that followed the commission meeting. So to me, the most important elements to like sort of have in the back of your mind as you're thinking about our recommendations are: one, these pathways will be organized by industry. Two, there will be a set of experiences for all students, whether they're on a pathway or not, like career exploration, advising, durable skills training, etc. In years 0 through 4, this is a cohort-based model where schools opt in, they apply into the program. There will be probably 30 to 50 schools per cohort, and each year new schools will be adopted into the cohort. Being in that cohort comes with intensive support and funding and training in addition to a set of criteria that those schools need to meet. And then at year 5, there would be sort of like a pull-up checkpoint of like, how did this go? What's going well? What's not? And re-envisioning for the future. Like would there be sort of systems level changes that we would want to make for all students in the state, like graduation requirements or an accountability framework change, et cetera? And then that there's an outcomes-based financing component to this. So schools have a floor that they need to meet in terms of the experience that they're providing to students if they opt into the program, but will have ample room to innovate and go above and beyond, and receive additional funding, and that there will be additional funding for students who are from disenfranchised groups in terms of the outcome-based financing. So similar to the Texas model that we heard about, there were like those equity bonuses for students from underrepresented groups. For students who are opting into the program from those groups, the outcomes-based funding is increased. I'll pause there. This is not something that I am like putting forward. This is coming from the Pathways Design and Governance team, but I wanted to share it with you all as you're thinking about recommendations. But if there are sort of things that you're already seeing that you want to provide feedback on, happy to start that conversation here and take it back to that team, or happy to move on if people just need a little bit of additional time to think about this offline.
One question that we have, Riley, is if a student in a neighboring town wanted to join the cohort and their town was not in this program, would they be able to do that?
Great question. Not sure. We'll ask it of the Pathways Design and Governance team. Jen, I saw you had your hand raised as well.
Sort of similar to what Jan was asking. I feel like I'm a little fuzzy on what the cohorts are.
Yep.
Yeah. Is there any sort of more specific information you have about how that works within one cohort? Is it a set of offerings, a set of pathways, and that's what's existing in that cohort? Are they shared amongst the schools that are in the cohort, or is each school in the cohort offering all those pathways? Sorry.
No, these are all great questions. So first, there's a number of questions there, so let me try to break them down.
No, I'm
one by
sorry.
one. No problem. So I think what we're talking about potentially is the state outlining, here's what pathways could look like at your school if you opt into this program. So here are the courses that you could offer in an individual pathway. Here are the dual enrollment opportunities, the work-based learning opportunities, the credentials of value, et cetera, that make up a pathway. And I think for years 1 through 4, and again, all of this is up for debate and mostly illustrative, not like decided. These would be the different pathways that are offered. How these are offered could vary. A school could opt to offer one, could offer multiple. We could say there's a floor. Schools must offer 2 or more if they're going to opt into this program. We could say that schools can participate regionally, right? Like what East Lyme is doing with, is it Watertown? Waterford? Can't remember, but where they're like one school does automotive, the other school does healthcare, and they share students. That could be something that is an option as well. But the idea would be that if you're opting into this program, you both are agreeing to offer a pathway at your school. Again, the number is still up in the air of how many you would be required to offer, but it would come with intensive supports like training and professional learning community and funding and on the ground implementation coaching, et cetera, for those schools in the cohort. And there would be about 30 entering each year, and then a new cohort of schools. Ben, correct me if I'm missing something, or feel free to add on. Also, Emily, I feel like we've talked about this as well, if you have other thoughts.
Riley, I think you covered, and the big thing is like this is all in development. It's going to be introduced on the 13th and get all your feedback. So tons of time to iterate on this.
So is it a competitive process amongst the districts? Like if every single district decides we want to participate in this, can they? Can they
Right
have,
now,
and then what do you get, right? Because I would imagine most districts have some version of this, but maybe not so clearly delineated and organized. So I think that's super valuable. And I don't know if anyone looked at the existing framework I shared maybe 2 meetings ago, because I think I missed the last meeting. Obviously, like we have a lot of this and no one knows about it. So what are we doing in this iteration of the work to prevent that from happening again? And I think you're totally right. It's like about being really explicit and organized and concrete about what the pathways are. Um, and I apologize. I feel like I'm touching on multiple things here, so I'm so sorry. Um, uh, do districts get money? I think is really maybe my question for opting into the program, because I think that's how we're going to really get them to clean up what they currently have so that it is clearer for students and families. And I completely agree with Althea's comment. Like, families don't know about all this stuff most of the time. And however, we can be much clearer and like plain spoken about what is available for their child, I think is great.
Yep.
Sorry. There was a lot there.
No.
I apologize.
Don't be sorry. Don't be sorry at all. These are the exact questions that we want people to be asking because, again, if we're all steeped in this and there's questions, just imagine someone who's not steeped in this every day, like, seeing these things for the first time. So, yes, to answer your question, the main thing about opting into this program would be it would come with funding and resources. That is what you get when you opt into the program. It comes with some criteria that you then need to meet around the amount of advising you're providing students, the work-based learning opportunities that you're providing students. But it comes with startup funding to get this program launched off the ground at your school. That doesn't mean you can't use what you already have, but it comes with additional funds. It comes with curriculum that is opt in. You don't have to use that curriculum, but if you're starting from ground zero and you don't have anything at your school around durable skills or AI literacy or career exploration, there would be a curriculum provided. And it would have a sequence course of study so that it takes the guesswork out for schools about like, what am I actually standing up? It would have an on the ground implementation coach that would be at your school, to see you through the process. There would be a year zero before you even start enrolling students where schools would apply and then would, receive half a year of like training and startup planning time. There would potentially be a group of, Jan, this was your language yesterday. Can you remind me what did you call the group of like 5 to 8 educators? Oh, like a pathways design team at your school that would be responsible for like thinking about that program at your school and how it would be designed and potentially receive a stipend. So again, none of this is fully baked. These are all for reaction and ideas, but the idea would be coming out of the Pathways Design and Governance team that there would be a lot of resources and supports provided to schools to help them meet this set of criteria, which is outlined here. So all students would need to receive personalized advising, career exploration, durable skills, and foundational academics. And then all students who are in a pathway, not every student at every school who opts in needs to necessarily be in a pathway. You could offer it to a subset of students if not all students were interested, would need a sequence course of study, dual enrollment opportunities, credential value opportunities, and work-based learning opportunities. And sorry, did that answer your question, Jen?
Yeah, I think I think to get districts to organize themselves in this way, there'll have to be money. And so I think that was probably the root of the question. And then I guess, right, is there enough money for every single district to opt into this?
I think we're talking about a cohort application-based model in the beginning years, not every district.
The other thing I would add on
Yeah.
funding is like, yeah, there's funding for the schools, but there's also funding to build the system that schools can plug into. Like for instance, in dual enrollment, like other states that have really strong dual enrollment programs, they have a statewide program. Connecticut doesn't, and it's totally up to schools to like figure out what dual enrollment course offerings they can do and figure out a way to pay for it. Like other states, they'll just pay higher ed directly for dual enrollment course completions, and they have organized it in a way where those credits are transferable, their sequence, etc. And like if we can move towards that, that takes a lot of burden off of school districts having to figure out a way to pay for it themselves and implement it themselves.
I think this conversation is super helpful. And Jen, there were so many like points and questions that you raised that I share. One of the things I'm really excited about as this sort of vision has evolved, I was getting really nervous about all of these ideas and new concepts and new ways of organizing schools, doing the thing that we've done in the past of, okay, now all 200 plus high schools have to implement this tomorrow. And I don't think that that is a recipe for success. So this sort of cohort driven model, get some proof points, scale what's working in more communities, makes a great deal of sense to me. I think to Jen's point around application selection, like there's a lot to tease out there to make sure that that is well thought through, that we're thinking through like what are the readiness conditions for a school to raise their hand. They don't have to have everything figured out. Like we want to support them on this, but there at least needs to be a will and a desire to reimagine some of these systems and structures. And I think we also need to be making sure that the schools selected for these initial cohorts are diverse and representative of communities across our state. I think the funding piece that you all were touching on is critically important, as well as the schools knowing like you're going to have a ton of resources poured into you, and you've got to pay it forward by sharing what you're learning, by welcoming schools in the future into your building to be able to replicate what you all are figuring out in these pilot years. So I'm excited and also conscious that there's now more questions to answer to make the vision real.
Yeah, and a little to Ben's your point, I think as a state we've allocated millions of dollars to offset dual enrollment
Hmm.
for local districts and students.
We've allocated $6 million. In the discovery
Yeah.
meeting, I compared that to what a statewide system looks like, and we're spending a fraction per student of what other states are.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. And so I think the idea would be in the beginning, get schools that are really excited about doing this work and also willing to work through the kinks, because I think we know that this is probably going to have a lot to figure out. And then hopefully, as each cohort goes through and those kinks are figured out, we have more credibility to stand on if we want to roll this out statewide, that like we really have proof points that work across a diverse set of schools. As Emily said, we want to make sure that we're in whatever cohort is accepted, it would represent schools from all income spectrums, all diversity spectrums, all, size and urbanicity spectrums. Like we really need to have a representative group of schools to show that this works regardless of what school type you are. In the interest of time, I am going to just quickly move us on, and I'm realizing I'm not in presenter mode, so that's probably making it hard to see. Are people able to see my screen now in presenter mode? No. What are you seeing?
The
Nothing
slide
changed.
itself and the side panel.
Okay.
There we
There you
go.
go.
Okay. So this was the set of goals, the sub goals that we had agreed upon 2 meetings ago. So Emily, Jan, and I met in addition to the meeting last week about what do students need to know, do, believe, and this is our proposed set of recommendations, all up for feedback. Please tear them apart. Like we want your active engagement in these. But coming up is a set of recommendations around what would students need, and then also what would schools need to enable that. So for students, the proposed recommendations are first around personalized counseling that every student would meet at least quarterly with a trusted adult. It would start in middle school. It would center career and post-secondary goals, and it would follow an intentional scope and sequence. This would be additional to group advisory. So there would be both the personalized advising, but then there would also be a course that all students are receiving in middle school and high school that would follow an intentional scope and sequence as well, that would include career exploration, durable skills, AI, tech, and financial literacy, and activities about purpose, belonging, and social capital. I'm going to pause there because the next idea is a little bit more complicated. So are there any questions or thoughts about these first two?
How are you defining middle school? And because when I think about communities, middle school is 7th and 8th grade. In Waterbury, it's a mix. We have 3 comprehensive middles that are 6 to 8, but we also have several pre-K-8 schools where middle school is embedded in the same building. And we also have a high school. Our interdistrict magnet school, WAMS, is 6th to 12th grade. So, you have middle schools within schools. So just wondering about how you're thinking about middle school.
Really good question and push. Emily, you had a really good framing around this yesterday when we talked about sort of like phase one would sort of be focused on ninth through 12th and then how you might roll it out from there. So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, Althea, I had similar questions. My worry is similar to the sentiment I shared a moment ago that like we try to do much too quickly and then end up doing a lot poorly. So I wonder if we go all in on the cohort of high schools. And one of the learning questions that we're trying to tease out in that first year is what also needs to be happening in middle school and elementary school so that students and families aren't getting their first dose of exposure to this in ninth grade. So one of the wonderings that I had like through this multi-year implementation process, is there an opportunity in year one to go all in on the initial cohort of high schools, and then in subsequent years, figure out what that vertical articulation needs to look like across the system so that there's just this steady drumbeat of pathways, supports, and knowledge building occurring at all levels.
So that being said, Althea, I think our answer is we have not yet defined middle school. And I think I'm not sure that we'll get there by August 13th, but it would be something that we would want the first cohort of schools and the second and the third to start thinking about, like, what should this look like at the lower grades, knowing that it needs to be introduced before high school, but we probably won't figure out exactly when and what until after the program starts.
Okay, yeah, I get that. And I know Emily knows this, like at least our comprehensive high schools have direct middle school feeder schools. At least, in that, I mean, some of our pre-K-8s go into the comps, but at least two of the 3 comps are directly connected to the middle schools. When I think about Wallace and Crosby and Wilby and North End, they're connected by a breezeway, a walkway. So there's opportunity to kind of do those introductions at the middle school level in those types of settings. I think the other ones might be a little more complicated for us in Waterbury, at least.
Yeah, and I think that's really helpful context as we think about like what would be the right schools to potentially pilot this in middle school. Like maybe those with the direct connections are the best places to start. Okay, the student passport. So this was an idea coming from Emily and Jan yesterday of what could it look like if students had a set of milestones in terms of experiences that they must complete along the way of their high school, maybe some middle school, though I don't think we have that as figured out, all the way into post-secondary journey. So that could be college visits, job shadowing, resume building, network mapping, etc. And it would be a passport that sort of lives with the student and would be reportable in some way, where it would say, like, okay, the first milestone that is that in the first ninth grade advisory or advisor counselor meeting, students need to identify what extracurricular are they going to get involved in and like try out in ninth grade. And it also includes, what, elective course do you want to take to explore one of your interests? That's illustrative and not necessarily the exact thing that would happen in that ninth grade meeting, but it would enumerate out for schools and for students, like what are the different milestones that you're trying to get to. That would be reported to the state so that the state could then know, like, are students on track with these milestones? And it would include a plan for high school, then a bridge plan for, okay, what are you doing the day after you graduate from high school? And then a long-term career plan. And it would follow the student such that if they went between institutions, students could access it if they're transferring high schools, but also as they go into post-secondary or training. I'll pause there because I'm sure I missed things. Emily, Jan, anything else you would add on that?
Just to connect it, Riley, to the earlier slides that you were showing, and apologies if you already stated this, the vision, as I understand it, is the cohort of schools like If you say, we're doing this, our school is in, you're committing to getting the resources that Jen was referencing and to doing all of these things in an outstanding way.
Yep, exactly. So this is what you're receiving support to achieve and what you're committing to provide as like, this is the baseline that you must provide. But you're not in it alone. The last item is the sequence course of study. So again, this is where the state would put together, like, here's what a pathway could look like. That doesn't give schools an opportunity to innovate within that, but it provides some guidance so that schools know what they're working towards. It needs to be clearly navigable for schools and students and families. What does this actually mean if I'm opting into a pathway? And there needs to be opportunities for project-based and career-connected learning in the CTE courses that students are taking, but also in traditional courses. So teachers need to receive the training to know how to connect math and English and social studies to careers and to projects, in addition to just being in specific CTE courses. I'll pause here. This is the set of recommendations that we were suggesting around students. Does this feel comprehensive? Is there anything that people want to add or that people disagree with?
Not to belabor the point, but I think as this journey is happening, ensuring that there are touch points with parents and caregivers along the way to support students. This can't be something that's just thought about between 7:30 and 2:30. It has to be thought about beyond that so that they're getting the supports during out of school time. And I think that has to be also inclusive of parents and caregivers and how we build their capacity along this journey, because we have a lot of first gen and a lot of immigrant students. I wish my colleague Dr. Garone was here, because her story is one that really resonates with me so much about what her journey was like for her and her parents. That's still a reality now in many of our communities.
Absolutely. And that actually brings me to this is the set of recommendations that we were thinking about for schools. And I think one thing that's missing from this second column with the like community-based organization partnerships is thinking about how do you loop in parents and caregivers and families. And so that's definitely something that I will add into this column. The set of items that we were thinking about for what do schools need in order to do all of these things that are on this page are the following. One, educators need to be invested in. So that is intensive training. That is creating these cross-functional pathways teams that are a group of 5 to 8 educators at a school, but it should be a mix of both teachers, counselors, administrators, parents, etc., who are really going all in on thinking about pathways and designing these programs, participating in professional learning communities, and really bringing those learnings back to their schools. And then increasing on-ramps for educators to become credentialed to teach dual enrollment or to teach CTE. This is a pain point that we've seen, is just like not having enough staff who have the requisite credentials to be able to support those things. So making it easier. I can provide some more specifics, but there is good research out there about like how do you create umbrella licenses such that a teacher doesn't need to have a specific certification in, anatomy and physiology, but there could be certifications around health sciences that cover them to teach a lot of different courses. And that enables greater participation of teachers to teach more courses. So there's some of those recommendations that I can pull together to sort of be more illustrative here. But any
Hey,
thoughts
Riley,
on
can I
Yeah,
can I jump in on that one? Because that one sort of there's a little bit of overlap on the recommendations that the student access group is working on too, on the licensing and certification of teachers. So I think we can just think through who's going to raise what. I think it makes sense for both places.
great. I'm gonna speed through these last three, but that does not to say that it's not open for feedback. I'm just cognizant of time, so please do let me know if you have thoughts on this, and I'm happy to take thoughts via email or individual calls. I actually am planning to reach out to every single person in our working group to set up individual time between now and the meeting on the 13th to make sure that if people have feedback that they don't get a chance to share during this meeting or don't feel comfortable sharing in front of the whole group, that you're able to process that. So the second recommendation is around leveraging community-based organizations to fill in gaps in staffing and resourcing, in creating connections. And we had floated this idea of the state creating some sort of portal for community-based organizations to facilitate schools making connections with organizations. I threw it in there because it had come up, but this is not set in stone if people don't think that this is feasible or helpful. And then on the data infrastructure side, that every school must use either a single or multiple data systems that house student plans and determine if students are on track, and has targeted report generation for the state, such that counselors are not spending a long period of time trying to figure out if students are on track or have the right reports. And it needs to be accessible and user-friendly for students, families, and educators to see their data. And there would be an option of a provider negotiated by the state and funded by the state. So the idea would be schools, you do not have to use a state mandated tool, but there is a state negotiated rate that is much cheaper for a tool that this or multiple tools that the state negotiates. And then additional funds and resources, so funding for hiring additional staff, and optional course sequences and curriculums for schools to use if they don't have something of their own that they are using and like. That was a lot. I'm going to pause there quickly, but I also want to show one additional slide before we wrap. But is there any quick feedback here of things that feel like they're missing or don't feel right?
Just around the curriculum, if districts have the opportunity to do whatever curriculum they choose, making sure that we have the ability to measure apples to apples. If our curriculum is one thing and theirs is another, just making sure we're measuring, true impact using the same metrics. So that's in the curriculum. I'm not sure how you'll be able to assess that to determine.
Yeah.
If everybody's okay.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think that actually the last slide that I wanted to show is just we have to pose some sort of question or questions to the broader commission. And one could be, do we actually want to give schools choice in the curriculums that they're using, or should cohorts have to use the state created curriculum? That is a decision point that doesn't, like, if we want to be able to more apples to apples compare, you could argue for having everyone in the cohort use the same curriculum. It just doesn't allow quite as much innovation and flexibility. So there is this set of questions. I think some we might have like a clear perspective on and really want to like put forward our sort of stake in the ground. And some might be places where we just want to open the floor up to the commission to say, like, what do you guys think about this? So I'll give just a minute for people to peruse through these. Are any of these ones that feel particularly resonant to pose to the commission, or anything that is missing that you would want to ask instead?
I think the first question is probably certainly stands out for me. It's putting a lot on teachers and educators at the high school level and potentially the middle school level who are already overwhelmed with expectations around learning and curriculum. And obviously it would be an opt-in for this initial cohort, but I'm not sure that it's realistic for us to expect teachers to now take on a career pathway curriculum and set of responsibilities and achieve the other learning that is expected, right? Around reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Yep.
And the other thing that has just been going through my mind, and I don't say this as a naysayer, I do worry a little bit that students may feel like we are forcing them at too early of an age to choose a career.
Yep.
And I love career exploration, but pathways, particularly for young people, can feel restrictive at a time when they actually don't need to be restricted at all.
Yep. Heard.
Larry, I'm so glad that you mentioned that last piece. Like that's been weighing on me. Like we're redesigning high schools in a very specific way, and do we know that that's the right way?
Right.
Well, all right, I work on a college campus, and a third of our students change their minds, meaning in
Right.
terms of their major, right? And another third panic that they've chosen the wrong major, even though they don't change their mind.
Yep. And so I'll offer two thoughts that I would love reactions to. One is, should there be a pathway that is career exploration? Like it is not, aligned to an industry. It is just meant for students who still want to explore. What would that look like? And do we worry that it's going to fall into the liberal arts, like general studies trap of like, we've seen the data that we showed at that earlier meeting of like students who graduate from CT State who are majoring in general studies earn $30,000 less a year than students who specialize. So like, is that potentially problematic? Two, I would just say that this is obviously anecdotal and a single student, but I did have an opportunity when we went to look at a Future Ready NYC school no problem, Dan, to talk to a student who was in a computer science pathway, but decided she wanted to become an early childhood teacher. And she was so grateful for the transferable skills that she learned in her pathway. She was like, for me, regardless of the computer science, I learned how to interview. I learned how to write a resume. I learned how to, do public speaking and all of these durable skills. So I do think we just need to design our pathways such that students are getting transferable skills, not just technical skills. That's really important, and that's sort of our charge. So, thank you all. We're at time. I will be reaching out to everyone to set up individual time to chat in the next week. And please do not hesitate to reach out with questions as they come up or thoughts about this presentation. I'll send this out after the meeting for people to noodle on, but don't hesitate to reach out if you have additional ideas.